Most people believe that the rich are simply playing the same money game as everyone else, just on a bigger scale, bigger salaries, bigger investments, bigger risks, bigger rewards. But that assumption is not only incomplete, it's misleading, because real wealth is not just about how much money enters your life. It's about what happens to that money after it arrives. It's about the invisible rules, quiet, disciplined decisions that determine whether money disappears, survives, or multiplies. The truth is, wealthy people are not always better at earning. In many cases, they are simply better at keeping, protecting, delaying, and positioning money in ways that most people never fully understand. They know when money should stay still, when it should quietly transform into an asset, when it should be left untouched, and when it should absolutely not be spent, especially when spending would only create the illusion of progress instead of the reality of strength. And that is exactly why two people can earn nearly identical incomes for years, live in the same city, follow similar routines, and still end up in completely different financial realities. One becomes stable, calm, and increasingly difficult to shake. The other remains active, visible, and constantly under pressure, financially fragile, even while appearing responsible on the surface. In this video, we are breaking down 5 quiet money rules that wealthy people follow, rules that rarely get attention because they are not flashy, not dramatic, and not designed to impress anyone in the short term. These rules do not generate applause. They do not create instant validation. But over time, they draw a very clear line between real financial strength and what only looks like success from the outside. And the reason this matters is simple. Most people do not learn these rules until they have already paid for that ignorance through costly mistakes. That's why this is not about admiring the rich. It's about recognizing patterns. Because once you begin to see these patterns clearly, something shifts. You stop mistaking movement for progress. You stop confusing a louder life with a stronger one. And you begin to notice the quiet behaviors that actually shape a person's financial future. Before we even get into the first rule, we need to address one of the most dangerous misunderstandings people carry about money. Most believe wealth is created through one big moment, a massive promotion, a lucky investment, a genius business idea, or a sudden breakthrough that changes everything overnight. That story feels satisfying. It's exciting. It gives people something dramatic to hope for. But in reality, that is not how wealth is usually built. Real wealth is far less dramatic. It is built through a quiet system, an internal operating structure made up of repeated decisions. These decisions determine whether money stays in your life long enough to become something meaningful. First, it becomes safety. Then it becomes capital. And eventually, it becomes leverage. But if those decisions are weak, even a high income can disappear into a more expensive version of the same insecurity. On the other hand, if those decisions are strong, even a moderate income can slowly turn into something stable, durable, and powerful over time. And this is where the real problem begins for most people. They are taught how to earn. They are taught how to spend. They are taught how to upgrade their lifestyle and signal that life is improving. But they are almost never taught how to make money harder to remove from their future. They are not taught how to preserve surplus, how to keep it alive long enough for it to turn into actual strength. That is why two individuals earning the same salary can move in completely opposite directions. One turns their extra money into margin, into assets, into options. The other turns it into higher fixed expenses, finance convenience, and temporary emotional relief. From the outside, both lives look normal. But under pressure, one structure gets stronger while the other begins to crack. And these 5 rules exist to explain that difference, why some people move quietly but become stronger every year while others stay busy, loud, and permanently close to the edge. Now, here is where it gets even more interesting. Wealth often looks confusing from the outside because people only see the visible parts. They see income, but they do not see how much of it is actually retained. They see purchases, but they do not see how exposed someone is underneath. They see confidence, but they cannot tell whether that confidence is backed by real options, patience, and cash reserves, or if it is simply being financed by the next paycheck. Once you understand this, your perspective shifts. You stop asking who earns more and start asking whose money is being managed under stronger rules, because over long periods of time, rules beat intentions, rules beat motivation, and surprisingly often, rules even beat talent. The first rule is simple, but it is broken constantly. Keep more than you display. In other words, do not allow your visible lifestyle to grow faster than your invisible strength. Most people feel an immediate pressure to show progress as soon as money increases. A small raise arrives, and suddenly there is a subtle expectation to upgrade something, maybe the apartment, maybe daily spending habits, maybe replacing items that were still perfectly functional. It feels natural. It even feels necessary, because modern life rewards what can be seen and quietly questions what cannot. If your income rises, but your lifestyle does not visibly change, people start wondering what's going on. And sometimes you begin questioning yourself too. It starts to feel like new income must be converted into a new identity, or else it does not count as progress. But wealthy individuals approach this completely differently. Instead of asking, what can I show? They ask, what can I keep? What can I protect? What can I leave untouched long enough to become something meaningful? Because they understand a fundamental truth. Money that is displayed disappears quickly, but money that is retained transforms your life. It becomes patience. It becomes a buffer. It becomes negotiating power. It becomes the ability to survive difficult seasons without collapsing into panic. And that is why one of the most overlooked signs of real wealth is restraint. Not because wealthy people never enjoy their money, but because they refuse to confuse visible comfort with actual progress. A higher monthly expense can make life look upgraded while quietly weakening the entire financial structure underneath. Real wealth often remains invisible for longer than people expect. It looks like money that was not spent. It looks like a raise that did not immediately translate into a more expensive lifestyle. It looks like someone who could upgrade faster but chooses not to, because they understand what retained capital can become if it is left alone. The reality is, many people are not spending to build stability. They are spending to maintain a story. They are buying confirmation. They are buying the emotional proof that their effort is finally paid off. But money that is constantly used to create appearances can never stay long enough to become protection. And this becomes even more difficult in a world designed around visibility. Social media, easy credit, constant comparison, and lifestyle signaling all combine to make spending feel rational, almost necessary. That is why keeping more than you display is not just a financial decision, it is a psychological one. It requires accepting that some of your strongest financial moves will not look impressive to others. And that is the cost of breaking this rule. The more aggressively you display progress, the less quietly you retain power. Wealthy people understand that the first job of money is not to impress anyone. It is to make your financial life harder to break. Rule number 2 builds directly on this. Buy assets, not relief. This single principle explains a massive portion of financial differences between people, because most individuals do not lose ground through one major mistake. They lose ground through small, repeated decisions that feel justified in the moment but weak over time. Think about how financial stress actually plays out. You work all week. By the end, you feel drained, under-rewarded, and mentally exhausted. When money finally arrives, what do you want? Not long-term leverage, not ownership, not something that will benefit you years from now. You want relief. You want something that makes this week feel easier. So money turns into convenience, better food, subscriptions, small upgrades, faster comfort, maybe a slightly more expensive weekend. And none of this is inherently wrong, which is exactly why it becomes dangerous. Because most people are not careless. They're simply tired. They are trying to create breathing room in a life that already feels tight. But economically, buying relief is very different from buying assets. Relief fades. It gives a temporary feeling, then disappears. Assets remain, a cash reserve remains, a useful skill remains, ownership remains, a productive system remains. And over time, that difference compounds in ways most people underestimate. The difference becomes even clearer when you zoom out and look at how these choices repeat over time. The wealthy consistently think in terms of what stays, while the average person is often guided by what soothes. One mindset quietly asks, what will this money turn into over the next 5 years? While the other asks, what will make this moment easier right now? And if you repeatedly choose the second question, your future slowly gets traded away in small, almost invisible pieces. That is why so many financial decisions feel harmless in isolation, but become costly when they become a pattern. One small act of comfort is not the problem. The issue begins when comfort becomes the default destination of every extra dollar. Because once that happens, every stressful moment starts pulling money away from assets and pushing it back into consumption. Over time, the person is not just spending money, they are spending the opportunity for that money to ever solidify into something stable. This explains why so many people feel stuck even as their income improves. The money does come in, but it is quickly converted into better experiences, smoother routines, and temporary relief instead of stronger positions. Then a year passes, and they look back wondering why nothing feels different. They earn more, yet they still feel exposed. And the reason is simple. Money that constantly becomes relief never becomes power. It never gets the chance to transform into leverage, protection, or long-term stability. Wealthy individuals quietly follow a different pattern. They allow a portion of their money to remain inactive, even slightly uncomfortable. They do not demand that every dollar provide immediate satisfaction. Instead, they deliberately leave some money in forms that do not ease the present so it can strengthen the future. That is one of the deepest behavioral differences between those who build wealth and those who remain financially fragile. The average person wants money to reduce pressure today. The wealthy are more willing to let money serve a longer-term purpose, even if it means tolerating short-term discomfort. This leads directly into the third rule, which carries a mindset strongly associated with long-term investors. Protect the downside first. This is something most people only learn after experiencing financial stress firsthand. The wealthy understand it earlier. They recognize that progress which can be erased easily is not real progress at all. If a single unexpected event, a job loss, a medical expense, a sudden rent increase, or even a major car repair can wipe out months of effort, then the financial structure is still too fragile to support meaningful growth. It may look like forward movement, but in reality, it is just a cycle of recovery. You are not compounding, you are rebuilding again and again on unstable ground. Most people are conditioned to focus on the upside. They think about how to earn more, how to find the next opportunity, what might grow quickly, or what could accelerate their progress. The wealthy spend far more time thinking about what could go wrong and how to prevent it from causing damage. They build buffers. They reduce unnecessary risk. They avoid financial setups where one difficult month could trigger a chain reaction of poor decisions. And this approach does not feel exciting, which is exactly why it is often ignored. For someone already living close to their limits, protection feels boring compared to ideas of rapid growth or side income breakthroughs. But if your system cannot survive disruption, then even good opportunities become dangerous. Because panic destroys judgment, desperation shortens patience, and fear forces decisions that prioritize survival over strategy. That is why building a financial cushion is so important, not because it looks impressive, but because it absorbs shock. It allows you to respond to challenges without immediately falling into reactive debt or stress-driven decisions. It changes the emotional experience of money entirely. Instead of feeling like every decision carries urgent pressure, you gain space. And with that space comes clarity. When fear decreases, patience increases. When patience improves, decisions become stronger. And when decisions improve, better opportunities become easier to recognize and hold on to. This is why protection is not the opposite of growth. It is often the foundation that makes growth possible in the first place. This is also why wealthy individuals are often more conservative than people expect, not because they lack ambition, but because they understand the cost of instability. One avoidable setback can damage not only money, but also confidence, time, and decision-making ability. Protecting the downside is not about playing small. It is about preserving momentum. Because the first rule of compounding is simple. You have to survive long enough for it to work. You do not need to win dramatically at the beginning. You just need to avoid being broken repeatedly. And that is a lesson most people learn only after they have already paid for it through experience. Now, moving into the fourth rule, we reach a shift that changes how you see work itself. Increase the value of each hour. Wealthy individuals are not just focused on working harder, they are focused on making each unit of effort more valuable. Most people operate within a linear system. More hours lead to more income, fewer hours lead to less. A raise helps slightly, overtime adds temporarily, but everything depends on continuous effort. Your time, your energy, and your attention all have limits, which means there is always a ceiling to how far this model can take you. The wealthy think differently. Instead of asking how to work more, they ask how each hour can produce more value. How can one effort continue generating results even after the work is done? That is where leverage begins. Sometimes it comes from ownership, sometimes from specialized skills, sometimes from systems, reputation, or distribution. The exact form may change, but the principle remains consistent. They do not want their entire future tied to a direct exchange of time for money. They want to build structures where effort continues to matter even after the immediate task is complete. This completely changes how productivity is measured. Someone can appear extremely busy but remain stuck in a low-value structure. Another person may seem less active on the surface but is quietly increasing the long-term value of every hour they invest. One is trapped in motion. The other is reshaping the equation itself. And this is why two equally hardworking individuals can end up in completely different positions. One keeps adding effort to a system that does not scale. The other focuses on improving the system itself. One becomes exhausted. The other becomes harder to replace. In practical terms, this can mean developing skills that command higher pricing, shifting into roles where judgment matters more than time, building something that can be sold repeatedly, or slowly creating ownership in something productive. None of these changes are dramatic at the start. In fact, they often feel slow and uncertain. But over time, they transform the value of your work in ways that simply working more hours never can. And here is the uncomfortable truth that many people overlook. They are often climbing the wrong mountain. They take pride in how hard they work, but they rarely question what that work is actually producing. If every additional hour still carries low value, limited protection, and no repeatability, then the future will remain constrained no matter how disciplined the present looks. Wealthy individuals quietly follow a different rule. Before increasing effort, they focus on increasing the value of that effort. And that single shift has the power to change everything. And now we arrive at the fifth rule, the quietest, yet often the most difficult to follow. Stay quiet while you build. This rule challenges something deeply ingrained in modern behavior, because today's world constantly pushes people to show progress before it is fully formed. There is pressure to display momentum quickly, to show visible improvement, to prove that your efforts are working in ways others can recognize. But wealthy individuals often take the opposite path. They spend long periods building in silence, during phases where very little on the outside appears to be changing. This silence is not mysterious or accidental, it is intentional. People who build quietly do not need every step to be visible. They are not driven by the need to turn every gain into performance. Instead, they become comfortable with repetition, with delayed results, and with progress that is not immediately noticeable. They understand that many of the most important financial moves feel unimpressive while they are happening. Paying off debt does not look exciting. Building a financial buffer does not attract attention. Investing consistently in productive assets does not feel dramatic. Spending years developing a valuable skill does not create instant recognition. Choosing not to inflate your lifestyle does not feel like progress. But these are exactly the decisions that grow into something significant over time. And this is where the emotional challenge begins. Quiet progress often feels uncomfortable because it does not provide immediate validation. You are doing the right things, but those actions are not yet translating into a visible identity. You are becoming stronger, but there is nothing impressive to show for it, at least not yet. From the outside, it may even look like nothing is happening. But internally, the structure is shifting. The foundation is getting stronger. The system is becoming more stable. Many people abandon strong financial strategies too early, not because the strategy is wrong, but because it does not deliver emotional rewards fast enough. Quiet progress feels slow, plain, and almost invisible. So they switch directions, chase something more exciting, or spend in ways that create the appearance of success before the reality has had time to develop. Wealthy individuals resist that impulse. They understand the emotional timeline of real growth. They know that it feels slow before it becomes obvious, and it feels boring before it becomes powerful. This rule matters because a large amount of financial damage comes from the need to feel successful too early. If you rely on external validation to confirm your progress, you will constantly feel pressure to spend, signal, or abandon discipline before it has time to work. But those who build quietly allow strength to develop without interruption. They recognize that some of the most important periods in life are the ones that look ordinary from the outside but are transformative internally. And that may be the deeper reason wealthy people follow this rule so consistently. They are comfortable with private progress. They do not need every chapter of their journey to be visible. Because they understand something, most people overlook the loudest phase of a financial life is rarely the strongest one. The strongest phase is usually quiet, controlled, and disciplined, where progress compounds long before recognition arrives. So why do most people learn these rules too late? Because modern life teaches almost the exact opposite. It encourages people to look successful before they are secure. It pushes them to expand their lifestyle faster than their stability. It conditions them to spend new income before learning how to protect it. It promotes comparison before structure. And by the time many people begin to understand these rules clearly, they are already dealing with the consequences of earlier decisions. Their fixed expenses are too high. Their safety buffer is too small. Their habits are built around comfort instead of strength. Their time has been invested for years into systems that never created leverage. The lesson eventually arrives, but often after the damage has already been done. That is why these rules can feel rare or hidden. Not because they are difficult to understand, but because everything around most people is designed to pull attention elsewhere, toward visibility, toward urgency, toward comfort, toward consumption, toward constant proof. Very little in modern culture encourages patience, restraint, protection, or quiet building. People are not failing because they lack intelligence. They are being trained by an environment that rewards appearance faster than substance. And this is the real cost. By the time someone finally recognizes these patterns, they have already paid for not knowing them through lost time, weak financial structures, repeated setbacks, and unnecessary stress. It can almost feel like these rules were intentionally kept hidden by those who benefit from them. But the truth is simpler. The rules were never hidden. They were just drowned out by louder messages. Spend now, upgrade now, show progress now, keep up now, reward yourself now. When those messages are repeated for years, quiet financial discipline becomes nearly invisible. But the purpose of learning these rules is not to regret the past. It is to reduce the delay going forward. Even if you discover them later than others, applying them now is still far less costly than ignoring them for another decade. Timing matters. The sooner you shift from performance to structure, the more time you reclaim. The sooner you stop using money to create an image and start using it to create durability, the more your future begins to stabilize. So here is the real separation. Wealthy individuals keep more than they display. They choose assets over temporary relief. They protect against losses before chasing gains. They focus on increasing the value of their time rather than just increasing effort. And they build quietly without needing immediate recognition. None of these principles sound exciting at first. In fact, they often sound too simple, too slow, or too restrictive. But that is exactly why they work. Because real financial strength rarely looks impressive in the beginning. It looks consistent. It looks disciplined. It looks easy to underestimate. Over time, however, that quiet consistency becomes incredibly powerful. These rules do not just change numbers, they change the structure of your life. They determine whether money creates stress or stability, noise or clarity, temporary comfort or long-term freedom. And that leads to one final takeaway. Do not try to fix everything at once. Instead, identify the one rule you are breaking most often right now and start there. Focus on it, correct it deliberately, stay with it long enough to feel the shift. Maybe your challenge is overspending to display progress. Maybe it is using money for short-term relief instead of long-term strength. Maybe your structure is too fragile, too exposed to sudden disruption. Maybe your time is still undervalued, or maybe you've been chasing visible success before building a real foundation. Wherever the weakness is, that is where the work begins. Because wealth is rarely built through one dramatic decision. More often, it begins the moment you stop treating money like performance and start treating it like structure. That is when your future stops looking decorative and starts becoming durable. And once that shift happens, money behaves differently. It stops disappearing as easily. It starts creating space. It creates patience. It creates options.